Welcome to Brad Explains. On this episode, Brad will explain Boothill.
Thanks, Greg. So, if you have been listening to our podcast, you will find that the characters are now in a Wild West setting. And we are playing Boothill. Boothill saw some first publications with the name Boothill in 1975, so it's one of the oldest still active, I don't think it's in print anymore, but people still play it, role-playing games in the world. It reached mild popularity in the 80s, early 80s, but it was coming up against, like Dungeons & Dragons, which kind of was the big kid on the block. We will be playing 3rd edition Boothill, which was released in 1990. It is a TSR game, so it's made by the same people that made the original Dungeons & Dragons game. So, they had dabbled into many different styles and settings of role-playing games, Boothill being one of the more popular ones, obviously not as big as D&D was. It is a Wild West setting. It's not necessarily historically accurate. It's more of, it's like a role-playing game, Wild West setting. It's got cinematic elements and very huge and wild, epic situations. There is even like a hint of like a fantasy atmosphere that may appear from time to time. But it's mostly like the old Wild West from, from like a movie, old John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, or even like more recently like Tombstone and Unforgiven, those kind of settings. Just imagine that with a little bit of the old Wild Wild West, Kevin Kline and Will Smith thrown into it there for the action, and comedy will be brought out as well. As far as like the people in it, obviously everybody's going to be a human relative to traditional role-playing game settings. But what differentiates the NPCs from each other in Boothill, as well as like the players from each other and the players from the NPC, is the goals and motivations of the individuals, their skill sets. How do they do what they do, and why do they do it? So it's kind of like the real world operates in that kind of setting. Everybody's got agendas and motives, and the way they are, personalities are going to come pretty heavily into Boothill. As far as like how the game itself mechanically works, big differences from standard role-playing games is Boothill only has 3 primary ability scores. The stats are strength, coordination, and observation. And they kind of bundle and roll up. Like strength is not only just how physically strong, but also typically how big your character is, or how hardy they are, how much like their constitution or endurance is also based off of strength. How long they can hold their breath, how big of a rock can they lift, how long can they run, how much damage how many wounds can they take before they fall. That's all basically based off of strength. Coordination is obviously coordinations, hand-eye coordination. It's also like reflexes. It determines your accuracy when you're shooting guns. It's going to be based off of coordination. Sleight of hand type things are going to be coordination. Balance things are going to be coordination. So basically it is your dexterity, agility, your speed. That's all kind of rolled up into coordination. And then finally you have observation. Observational awareness is a good way to kind of put it. It's situational awareness. So it is the ability to see things, hear things, smell things, as well as conventional wisdom or intelligence from other role-playing games. So how smart your character is usually is rolled up into the observation stat as well. Okay, so those are the 3 primary stats. And then you also have, in Boothill, you have 2 secondary stats. They don't come into play as much, but they do have a noticeable effect on the game. And those abilities are stature and luck. Stature is how well is your character known. If you walk into a bar, I'm going to roll a die, and if I roll, if your stature's really high, it's more likely that people will know your character. Oh no, that's gunslinging Teddy. They'll recognize you if you have a high stature. Whereas if you have a low stature, you walk into the bar and nobody even knows you. And through actions and deeds, a character can increase their stature, kind of like Star-Lord in Guardians of the Galaxy was always trying to get people to recognize that I'm Star-Lord. And then not until the very end, when he had done a lot of things, did that guy say, "Oh, it's Star-Lord," and he's like, "Finally." But it's that kind of thing. Stature is your recognizableness, how well you're known in society. And then the other secondary stat is called luck. Luck is sort of that is the catch-all secondary stat. What that is that's if a player character is mortally wounded, he gets to make a luck roll, and if he succeeds his luck roll, something happened where he's not mortally wounded. Also, luck is used to determine any sort of random chance stuff. Luck is used to modify that in the character's favor if he has a high luck. Having a low luck score isn't necessarily bad luck. All it is where you're just not lucky. So there's not like a penalty for having a low luck. You just don't get the reoccurring bonuses from those that have a high luck. So the last factor in making a character and playing the game is what you use to fine-tune and round out your character, and that's skills and profession. Unlike most role-playing games out there isn't a set skill grouping for your character. Like, you're a warrior, so these are the skills that you get to pick from, or you're a wizard, so these are the skills you get to pick from. Boothill is definitely more sort of open-ended. You get to choose in your mind what your character is like, and then completely pick the skills that you think he would have. And the number of skills you get is based inversely proportionate to your stats. So the higher all your stats are, the fewer skills you'll get, and that is to balance out so you don't have these min-maxing situations where my stats are all pegged out and I have a ton of skills. You're right. Boothill kind of avoids that. There's some people that like it, some people that don't, but it's a way they kind of balance it out to make the scrawny, I'm a scrawny little weak slow guy, but I got tons of skills, so I'm still a desirable to play character. And then there's the professions. Professions are also just sort of an arbitrary labeling of your character to kind of help not only you, but the judge as well as your other player characters keep an image of what your character is like. So their set of skills, their primary stats, their secondary stats, kind of in this big bowl that's capped off with, and this is my profession. I'm a gambler. I'm a sheriff, and that kind of finishes off that mental picture to help you see how your character acts as well as the other characters as well. Talking about combat, Boothill combat is to be avoided, I guess is the best way to say it, but it's unavoidable through the course of the game, but it's very lethal. There is no good defense like in standard role-playing games. There's force fields or heavy armor or things like that. In Boothill, it doesn't really work that way. If there's Wyatt Earp standing in the middle of the street, this big tough U.S. Marshal, he is just as easy to be hit as a old crotchety farmer just standing there also. So there isn't really a defense. It's whether they're hit or not is totally based off of the person shooting, how fast they're shooting, what kind of weapon they're shooting, how skilled are they at shooting. It's all coming down to that. And just like in real life, unlike most role-playing games, if you get shot, there's a good chance that you're going to die. So there's a lot of one-hit kills. So you really want to avoid fights unless you can't. I guess, just like the Old West. People that had the shootout draw contests in the street were considered really dangerous and so brave and so dangerous because one shot can kill you. And it translates into Boothill that way as well. Hit locations, you can get shot in the head, you can get shot in the arm, you can get shot in the leg, the chest, the abdomen, etc. So that being a part of the game makes head wounds and chest wounds very dangerous. So avoid shootouts, but they're going to happen because it's got to be exciting and crazy. It's the Wild West, after all. Like in Dungeons & Dragons, you'll find where you'll have a higher level warrior running into a cave where there's like a dozen orcs, and he doesn't even think twice about it. Whereas in Boothill, if a guy runs into a building or whatever, and there's a dozen gunmen, yeah, he's going to poop himself and run out the door because 12 dudes shooting at you, you're going to be in a serious world of hurt. So, yeah, you'll see that combat tends to be fast and deadly. Now, in Boothill, the game master is called the judge. So I'll be the judge in this particular game. And my job is a lot more intense in a game like Boothill because it's so story-driven, so open-ended. There isn't a lot of super well-defined things in the game. It really is just sort of a skeleton of a role-playing game that you just kind of make a story to, create your own maps, name your own cities. Everything is basically up to you. The characters, their skills, their professions, their abilities, that's just sort of a guideline for those players to use to make their decisions. So you'll see as the story goes on, there's obviously a plot going on, but how they get to it is, and get through it, navigate the story, and entertain everybody as well as themselves, is going to be a lot more teamwork, not only with each other, but also with the judge to make it flow, to make it go. It'll still be very challenging and very difficult. Arguably more so than the classic Dungeons and Dragons games, just because it's a lot easier to fail. Let me put it that way. But yeah, as an open-ended, very story-driven game, Boothill gives the players, the judge, as well as, in this case, the listeners, a chance to immerse themselves in a very exciting, unpredictable environment. And the outcome, hopefully, will be in the character's best interest.
Thank you for listening to Brad Explains. If you have a question for Brad to explain, email us at losersofinitiative@gmail.com. Also, find us on Facebook for more content and information. Bye-bye.